All right, so let's give a round of applause for our local Rochester movement, folks. And I want to make sure before my grandfather was a Baptist preacher, so my voice tends to project. We do have a microphone, but I want to make sure, this is comfortable for me? Can everybody hear, especially in the back? Are we good? Excellent. Then the second thing I want to acknowledge, what's your name, sir?
Dave?
Dave?
Yeah.
Dave has decided that he's tired of just hating the corporate media. He's become the people's media. So David is actually recording this. I don't even know where it's going to go. But I want to make sure, David, that this is good for you, the lighting where I am. Can you read all of this? Because here's the thing, as great as this crowd is, thanks to David's work, we know that literally hundreds, probably thousands of people will know about this event that the Rochester Move to Men organizers organized for us and that you came here for. So I want to make sure, David, you're ready for us to get underway. Fantastic. So as Jenny said, my name is David Cobb, and I am a lawyer by training, but more importantly these days, I consider myself an engaged citizen. You see, as a lawyer, I've sued corporate polluters. As an engaged citizen, I've lobbied elected officials. I've run for political office myself. In fact, I ran for Attorney General as a lawyer in the state of Texas, pledging to use that office to revoke the charters of corporations that routinely violate health, safety, environmental protection, and worker safety laws. Yeah, right? But there are tools that can be used right now if there is only the political will and a social movement behind it to make it happen. And I have been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I always know that I'm in the right crowd when that's what gets the huzzah and way to go. And all I'm saying is, folks, I have used and will continue to use every tool available to try to create the systemic change that we so richly deserve, so desperately need, in order to create the country that I was taught that we had as a little boy. As a little boy, I was taught that the United States of America stood for liberty and justice and equality. And I was so proud to be from that country. And as I've grown up, I realize I have been lied to. But not exactly lied to. Instead, let's say I, like all of us, were subjected to a creation myth. And here's the thing. The reason that creation myth is used by the ruling elite, even though it's not entirely true, even though we believed it as children, is because we want to believe it. You see, as human beings, we want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And I want to be clear about this. Every child who's being exposed to that creation myth, it's working on them as little kids because they want and deserve it. And yes, American children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And it's not because they're American children. Because Iraqi children want it. And Israeli children, and Palestinian children, and Mexican children, and Senegalese children. See, all I'm getting at is we really need to understand that creation myth of liberty, justice, and equality works because it actually speaks to our shared humanity. And that at Move to Men, we are absolutely committed to winning a constitutional amendment, and we'll get into that. But I want to ground from jump in this conversation that what we're talking about are human rights. That as human beings, we have the absolute right to co-create collectively the society that we're supposed to live in. And I reckon that because you're here, I probably don't have to convince you that things are bad now, right? Yeah, because you've chosen to come here. So I believe that my real job is to persuade you that Move to Men has a plan. And so because I want to be persuasive, I want to share with you something that I learned intuitively when I was a successful trial lawyer, but now cognitive scientists are proving, and that's this. If you want to be persuasive, facts don't really matter so much. The first time I heard that, I thought, this is terrible. Like many of you, I've invested a lot of time and energy in facts, right? But then I came across the work of a fellow named George Lakoff. George Lakoff is a cognitive scientist who, by studying how we process information, made this observation, that human beings and our brains are not merely supercomputers collecting data, running logical algorithms, and then deciding how to act. What George Lakoff says is human beings understand the world through the stories we tell each other. And the stories that are told over and over again become the narrative, or the frame, how you see the world. And what Lakoff says is, if you're going to present anybody with new facts or new information, you absolutely have to present it in a way that makes sense to them in light of their pre-existing narrative, their pre-existing frame, how they already see the world, right? And so, as I tell this story, and I am going to tell a story, but as I tell this story, I want to challenge you to challenge me. At the end of this story, ask yourself, is this a story that only liberals and progressives can hear and appreciate? Or has Move to Amend figured out a way to tell a story that can unite all Americans, regardless of political party affiliation or ideology? Is this that kind of story? And as I tell the story, I want to make sure that we cover 4 concepts together. The first concept that we're going to cover is the word democracy. That word gets tossed around a lot. So let's make sure we've got some common ground. From what language does the word democracy derive?
Greek.
Greek, very good. Demos means?
Oh.
Anybody know? Say it, Paul. It's all right.
Something of the people?
The people. That's exactly right. Literally, it means the people. And the word kratia in Attic Greek means rule or power. So literally, translated from the Attic Greek, the word democracy means the people rule. Pop quiz. How many of y'all believe we the people are ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. Look around. I ask this question everywhere I go. Not a single one of you raised your hands. I ask this question all across the country. I give this presentation about 150 times a year. I'm on the road literally half of my life talking to a group like you almost every night in a different location. I ask the question everywhere I go. Almost nobody raises their hands. That's a problem. But saying it in a different way, I think it's a good thing. What? Oh no. It's not a good thing that we the people don't rule. It's a good thing that we're not raising our hands to that question anymore. Because 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago when I would ask that question, everybody would raise their hands. Or they'd say, well, you know, we've got some problems, but yes. You see, I think it's a good thing that we're living at a time where we the people are coming to terms with a harsh but truth. And that is that notwithstanding the creation myth, notwithstanding what we want and deserve, we the people are not actually ruling in this country because there's a small ruling elite who run the big mega transnational corporations. They're not just exercising power, folks. They're ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling over us. And we, the people, get to choose between Coke or Pepsi. We can choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store checkout line. We even get consumer choices. And that's a good thing, but don't mistake a consumer choice with political power. See, political power would be the opportunity to participate in a meaningful way with how our society is organized. And that brings me to the next topic, which is sovereignty itself. Folks, if I just had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think of? Quick, shout it out, the sovereign.
Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah. Queen Elizabeth is but others said king, right? The point is royalty, the monarchy, right? That's because 500 years ago, the monarchs were the sovereigns. The sovereigns were the monarchs. Those words were literally synonymous. And where did the monarchy claim their authority to rule?
From God.
God. And that you don't get more legitimate than that. Right? If you can say your authority to rule comes from God, then you get another, like a special dispensation. Literally the word sovereignty means the authority to rule. Right? And folks, I am a Green Party member, and I'm proud of that. But I'm equally proud to say I frequently work in coalition and partnership with Democrats on day to day. And I frequently work with Republicans and Libertarians. And honestly, around fights for civil liberties, it's frequently Republicans that I work in coalition with, or Libertarians that I work in coalition with. See, I'll work with anybody if I can find common ground in a coalitional way, right? And I say that not so you'll pat me on the head. I say it so you'll understand and appreciate what I mean when I say, in my 15, 20 years of social change organizing, looking for coalition partners, I've never had the privilege or the opportunity to work in coalition with a monarchist. And 500 years ago, that's all there were. Think about that for a moment. Today, we can't even say out loud the idea divine right of kings without people thinking we're crazy, right? I mean, when is the last time you heard somebody in a political argument saying, well, you know, we really need to check in with the king who has the direct connect with God, who is going to tell us how society should be organized. Has anybody had that? Right, exactly. Paul's chuckling, right? That's a crazy idea, right? Except for how 500 years ago, every person basically believed that. And the reason I want to say that is to really ground something. And that is this. Hold on, because the text is going to get metaphysical on y'all. Here it comes. We are all collectively participating in creating our shared collective reality. Right now. Another way to say it is, if enough people think that something is true, and enough people act like it's true, it is true. It becomes true. And so, if it is true that the United States of America is fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive, that is true. And if it is true that these huge corporations are destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself, that is true. See, if these things are true, I suggest we ought to start thinking and acting differently than we have been. Maybe we ought to start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis. You know why I think we ought to start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis? Because we're in a crisis. We need to say that out loud. We are in an ecological crisis. It's not coming, it's here and going to get worse unless we interrupt it. We are in an economic crisis, and it's not over, by the way. Right? If you think the housing crisis and the housing bubble is bad, wait till the student loan crisis really hits. Because young people today are being saddled with a debt that people of my generation and older cannot even fathom. Oh, and by the way, these young people who are being saddled with $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 worth of debt, there are no actual jobs in line for them, or very, very few of them. This is going to be trillions of dollars that have been extracted from the economy, sucked up by a small ruling elite of billionaires, while the rest of us are paying. This economic crisis is also leading to a political crisis. And I want to be clear about this political crisis, my friends, because the political crisis is happening because our elections are being stolen from us, and the opportunity to actually have meaningful conversation is dwindling. And only those who are already vetted by the very wealthy are the ones who are presented as, quote, viable candidates. Right? In fact, I think it's time that we got used to and comfortable with saying the F word in public. Would I actually say it? Of course not. I'm a Southern boy. But I will say this F word, fascism. We have to understand that there is a corporate takeover of our government and our politics. And remember, Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator and fascist political philosopher, said fascism should more properly be called corporatism because it merges the economic might of our transnational corporations with the military might of our nation. And he thought it was a good thing. Think about that. And that brings me to the next topic, which is legal personhood. Please note I did not write corporate personhood on the board. Right? Because legal personhood very simply just means the ability to assert rights. And because we're talking about legal personhood, we mean the ability to assert rights under law. And saying it that way, I hope it's obvious, this is not a concept that only lawyers should concern themselves with. The issue of who can assert rights in a court of law and have those rights recognized and acknowledged has been at the very core of every social movement in this country. From the American Revolution itself, to the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the trade union movement, the civil rights movement, the question of who can assert rights and have those rights acknowledged in the court system has been at the core of every movement. And the last word on the board is the word corporation. From what language does the word corporation derive? It's Latin. Corpus means body, and the suffix tion just means to have or create. And so when you translate corporation from Latin, it means to have or create body. And by body, I mean physical body. And that's because in law school we're taught. By the way, are there any lawyers in the crowd besides me that would admit it? No? In law school, we are taught a corporation is a legal fiction. And even if you haven't been subjected to 3 years of law school, if you've just heard that phrase that a corporation is a legal fiction, even if you couldn't precisely define it, if you've heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, raise your hand. Nobody? Well, I'll tell you, the idea that a corporation is a legal fiction is because, as my first year corporations professor told us, a corporation is a legal fiction. It doesn't actually exist in the physical world. And I remember thinking, well, wait, isn't that reality? And she said, no, that a corporation is a legal fiction because we're going to pretend like this group of people, the investors, the shareholders, we're going to pretend like the resources that they've accumulated and the mechanisms and the contracts that they make, a very, very concept, a very profound abstract concept, we're going to pretend like it's one thing in the material world so we can treat it a certain way under law. And remember, if enough people think that something is true, and enough people act like it's true, it becomes true. Folks, something very important to recognize, that part of my job as I travel around the country is to say, corporations only exist because we the people say they do. If we say they don't, they don't. And if we say they exist, we can say how they will operate and what they can or cannot do. They are actually created collectively by us. All of us in society, right? And the legal system is, and the political system is underlying it, because the word corporation comes from Latin, because the first corporations ever created by the creative genius of the American mind were created during the Roman Republic. For example, how many people here have said all roads lead to Rome? That's something you're familiar with? All right, well, check it out. That road system, it was built, operated, and maintained as a corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, that amazing bit of Roman engineering that moved water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Let's just take a moment to say, see how clever human beings are? See how creative we are? I'll tell you this. I don't think there's a problem today, actually, that we don't have a solution to. Our problems are not actually scientific and technical anymore. They're almost all political. Because if we, the people, actually controlled our political process, we could solve almost every... There are solutions that are just not being implemented, right? But that aqueduct system, guess what? It was created, operated, and maintained as a corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospitals. Can you guess? Corporation. Pop quiz. What is a water system, a road system, a university, and a hospital? What do those things all have in common? Louder, Jenny.
Corporation?
No. Public. Yeah, I know. I heard somebody say public. These are all public things. See, the genius of the concept of a corporation is to merely create a mechanism under law and society to facilitate and encourage private resources to come together to put to some public use. Saying it that way, I hope it's obvious that neither David Cobb, nor Jenny, nor Nancy, nor Amanda, nor Barbara, Paul, none of us are against corporations. Right? What we're against is the outrageous, ludicrous idea that these entities created under law have constitutional rights. Right? So we're not, yeah, you can applaud that. She's like, well said, she says. That we are not anti-corporation. That's ridiculous. Right? But I also want to point something out. The way the huge mega transnational corporations are operating in this country is not exactly to benefit the public. And that's because the concept of the huge transnational corporation, actually, it was first created in the 15th and 16th century of Europe. You know the age of discovery? I put discovery in all of those imaginary quotation marks because, after all, what did the Europeans discover in the 15th and 16th century? Answer, yes. What they called the New World, right? Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash, there were people living there. It wasn't the New World to them. It was their world, right? And here's the thing. I'm forcing us to be honest about something. What we were taught as children in these sanitized American textbooks about the age of discovery, it was actually the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. That's what empire means. You can applaud that. We got to tell the truth. And here's the thing. The concept of a corporation was created as an instrument of empire. The East India Company was one of the very first corporations. They were called joint stock companies, literally designed to militarily conquer the entire subcontinent of India and to force those people to work and labor to steal the resources from their own land so that the resources could be sent to the shareholders of the joint stock company of the East India Company. It was a business model based on imperial conquest and murder. Right? And to make my little story a specifically American story, because remember I'm telling a story to explain things. How many colonies in the founding of the United States? Y'all all know this, so say it out loud.
13.
13, we all know this, right? So here's a harder question. Of those 13 colonies, how many were corporations?
13.
Nicely done! Yeah, go. The kids say bump it. Bump it. And here's why, because the word corporation means to have or create body. And here's the thing, it took the monarch or the sovereign to create each one. Now, the king created Massachusetts. Now, somebody might be stuck in that old linear thinking and say, that's ridiculous. Massachusetts was already there. But that's why this is a trick question. The land was there. The people who lived on the land was there. Reality was there, but it took the king to create it as Massachusetts. And the king created Massachusetts by the use of a very specific legal instrument. Does anybody know the name of that legal instrument that the king used to create Massachusetts? It's called a charter. And now I will illustrate how it is that the king created Massachusetts. And in this little illustration or this exercise, I'll be the king. Hey, why do y'all think I get to be the king in this exercise? Answer? I'm telling the story. See how important stories are? See how important it is that we ought to ask who's telling these stories? And let's remember that today, 8 huge corporations are controlling all of the story, or about 95% of the stories that we hear. And I mean not just news, I mean films and books. The narrative is being corporatized. They're trying to corporatize our very imagination space, right? Stories really matter, which is why it's so important we tell each other the truth. And that we tell our own stories so that we see the corporatists whenever they're just trying to propagandize us. But in this illustration, I'll be the king and I will create Massachusetts. But listen, y'all, I'm the king. I'm not going to bother with the day-to-day affairs of Massachusetts, right? So I will create a new entity or a new title called a royal governor. And now I will quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts. Watch this. I, the king, create Massachusetts. I assign a royal governor and assign a person as the royal governor, assign that person the legal responsibility. And here comes the quote in the original charter that created Massachusetts. The royal governor must plant, rule, and govern this entire area on behalf of me, the king, to benefit me, the king, but also to benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began on the same imperial business model as the East India Company did. And today, we wouldn't call the person responsible for the joint stock company the royal governor. In today's parlance, what would we call that royal governor? CEO. A CEO. Friends, what I'm asking you to consider is this. The American Revolution was not merely rejection of monarchy as a form of rule. It was that. It was not merely a rejection of no taxation without representation. You know what it was at its fundamental level? The American Revolution was a people's uprising against the illegitimate rule of joint stock companies and the king himself. That's our history. The Boston Tea Party. Do you think that the Patriots threw all the tea in the city of Boston into the harbor that night? No. There was only one type of tea thrown in the harbor that night. You know what type of tea was thrown in the harbor? Louder. Only tea belonging to the East India Corporation was thrown into the harbor. So today, when people celebrate the Boston Tea Party, you know what they're actually celebrating? An act of peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience that resulted in property destruction of about $1 million from a corporation. Sometimes I wish the modern-day Tea Party would really do a little more history, a little more research to really understand what it is that they're celebrating. They're literally celebrating nonviolent civil disobedience targeting corporate rule. Go Tea Party! Just saying, there's an interesting way to think about this. And now I want to point out that in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won. And I'm going to be very clear, friends, I am a revolutionary. Now, I'm a nonviolent revolutionary. I'm absolutely committed to not using violence as an affirmative political stance. But I do think we need a transformation of the social, political, and economic institutions that this country is operating under. That makes me a revolutionary. And as a revolutionary, just like the American revolutionaries. And as a revolutionary, it makes me very happy to remind myself and you that in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won. And when you win a revolution, you get to write a new charter, a new document, a new legal instrument to describe how society is supposed to be operating. So in this country, what is that charter called? What is the supreme law of the land, the document that we're supposed to govern us? The U.S. Constitution. How many people have read the U.S. Constitution? Oh, good. A couple of hands go up. So y'all can grade my paper. See if I get this right. I will tell you, when you read the Constitution in its entirety, you'll see two actors, like two real big concepts. The first concept is the most important concept. In fact, it's so important it's the first three words of that document. We the people. All I ever have to do is put my hands up to my ear and people say it. We the people. We've been trained. Those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. See, we the people come together to create the second concept, which is government itself. Saying it this way, I hope it's obvious that we the people create government. Government is actually dependent upon we the people. In fact, I like how some of my friends say it, the people should never be afraid of the government. Actually, they say government should be afraid of the people. Pop quiz, how many of y'all believe the government is afraid of we the people? I'm glad those, yeah, so several hands went up. See, for those of you who didn't raise your hands, let me suggest that's a slow burn question. Here's a follow-up question. If the government isn't afraid of we the people, why are they spying on us? Because let me tell you something, friends, and this is something that is not easy to say, but it's a truthful thing. It's an objective thing. For the last 40 years in this country, whether there was a Democrat or a Republican in office, there has been an increase in the amount of surveillance of ordinary Americans. Every administration, it's gotten worse. Every administration has utilized more and more security apparatus and surveillance over the American people. The reality is the government is afraid of us, and I'm going to do you one better. The ruling elite are deathly afraid of us. And if you don't think the ruling elite is afraid of us, I got one word for you. Occupy. Right? Because if you think, because look, I had the privilege of traveling across the country during the Occupy encampment era, right? And everywhere I went, you know what I saw? People talking to each other. That's what I saw. Ordinary people coming together and having conversations. See, the ruling elite doesn't mind if we talk to each other, provided we're talking about sports, or entertainment, or celebrity, or fashion, or the latest gadget that they want us to buy. But the Occupy movement scared the bejesus out of them because we were talking about why does 1% rule 99%? Because they were acting, why in the richest country the world has ever seen do 25% of the children go to bed hungry at night? What is this security state that's being created? What is the Federal Reserve, and why does a private banking consortium control the money supply? See, they were asking at Occupy real questions about how society actually operates. And so, again, it doesn't make me happy to say, Republican leadership, Democratic Party leadership, all the way up to President Obama, and the Freedom of Information Act is clear. They work in concert together with the mayor's offices and the police departments all across the country to intentionally and deliberately dismantle and destroy the Occupy movement because they were scared of what it represented. And if I ever had the opportunity to talk to a member of the real ruling elite, you know, not even the 1%, but the 0.00 1%, the people, the billionaires who are actually running this country, you know, I know that right now you're so wrapped up in the crack pipe of power and wealth accumulation that you can't see anything next to your next hit of power and wealth accumulation, and that you're scared I might take it away. But let me tell you something. We're a peaceful and loving movement. And although you may be scared of what we represent, your grandchildren are going to be grateful we staged intervention on your addicted ass. Right? These people are like addicts. And honestly, they're mentally ill. And I don't say that to evoke a laughter, because I have mental illness in my family. Mental illness is serious, and mentally ill people need and deserve help. And here's the thing. Anybody who's making decisions that they know is destroying the planet, and they're making them anyway just so they can have extra abstract zeros in a bank account to increase their standing, they're just sort of, and really, like, once you get a certain amount of money, like, all the things you need are right there, right? Like, these billionaires who are destroying the planet, they're doing it just sort of in competition with one another to see who can have the most zeros at the end of the bank account. That's actually crazy, right? And the thing is, instead of getting them help, society put them in charge, and that's kind of our fault, isn't it? And so that's the thing. Move to Men represents an honest effort for enough of us to get together, have honest conversation about the fact that we've actually got to take the crack pipe of power and wealth away from the addicts, right? We've got to, and I do want them to get some help, right? Like, maybe we could take them outside. Like, I had a great visit on the river here. I think maybe a walk along Y'all's River might actually help some of these folks. Say, oh, look, the natural world, it's actually quite beautiful, right? And I've been from Duluth down to the Twin Cities. I mean, Minnesota might be a place to bring them in the summer and the spring. I was here last winter, Paul. Maybe not. Y'all are a hardy breed. I want to get back to the Constitution, because I really want to be clear. I actually think it's important to recognize in the Constitution as written, we the people are described and understood to be free and sovereign. And what does the word sovereign mean again?
Rule.
The authority to rule. See, government doesn't have the authority to rule. Government is supposed to be subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? We the people. Accountable to whom?
We the people.
We the people. That's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. We'll continue. In the Constitution, we the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. And I'm going to stop for a moment to underscore something. The difference between rights and duties. See, sir, if you've got the right to do something, it means you can do it. And you don't need my permission. You don't need this group's permission. You don't need city council's permission. You don't need the Minnesota State Legislature. You don't need anybody's permission. Right? Here's the thing. If you know what, I bet that's me. Pretty cool ringtone, right?
Well, it is.
I am so sorry. Let me do that. Turn that off. Let that not happen again. And I will beg your pardon.
It was a catchy tune.
Well, thank you,
Just have to tell
Jenny.
us who's
Da-da-da-da-da. When you have the right to do something, it means you can do it. Government never has rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And those duties come from the concept that all power resides with the people. Thomas Jefferson said, no government is even legitimate if it does not have the consent of the governed, because the people are the source of all the power. But get this, what's with population more or less of Rochester? How many? About 100,000, more or less? Yeah. So I'll tell you this, I will celebrate that 100,000 people in Rochester hold all the political power. That's a true statement, but I'll tell you this, I would not want to go to a meeting of 100,000 people to make city policy. Now let's ask, what's the population of the county? Probably about 200,000 maybe? Now let me ask you this. What is the population of the state of Minnesota? I thought it was about 4 million, but maybe 3. Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's a big, right? Does anybody want to go to a meeting of 5 million people to make Minnesota state law? That's crazy, right? And look, I like political meetings, but I'm not going to that one. It's insane. See, in our frame of government, we the people collectively do hold all the political power, but we wisely delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Do we delegate all our power to government? No! We only delegate enough power for government to perform the duties that we have told them to do. And how does government discharge those duties? Why, they write public policy and laws. And whether we agree or disagree with them, if it's gone through a legitimate process, that's the public law. But remember, the one thing that no public law can do is to violate anybody's private constitutional rights. You see how important it is, the difference between our private actions and our public communitarian self? And saying it this way, I want to say, this is brilliant. This is beautiful. We should try that in this country. This would totally work. And I'm not joking, this is brilliant. I'm not joking, this is beautiful. And I'm not joking, we've never tried it. Because before I go 1 second further, waxing poetic about the brilliance of the U.S. Constitution, somebody tell me what year this Constitution gets adopted. What's the ratification year, if you know? 1789, that's right. 1789. 1789, and I want that date on the board so I can remind you that the concept of legal personhood means the ability to assert rights. So in 1789, when this document that we were taught to revere was enacted, who was a legal person? What were their characteristics?
White.
Male.
Landowner.
Property owner.
Landowner. You see how many restrictions were put on who was a legal person? And so the problem is not in the framework. The problem is literally in the definition of who is a legal person. Because if everybody is a person, this would work. But it took social movements to ensure that everybody was a legal person. In fact, to put a fine point on it and to say it as honestly as I can, this document, for all its beauty and all the rhetoric, it did not stop the intentional, deliberate effort at genocide against the human beings who already lived here. The indigenous people were not considered persons with rights. This document, for all its beauty as a concept, did not prevent the enslavement of Africans who were brought at the barrel of a gun or the point of a spear and forced to build this country with slave labor. They were not persons with rights. This document didn't protect women. Women were not persons with rights. In fact, this document didn't protect most of the white men. Because most of the white men, as my friend said, what's your first name again? Will, as Will correctly pointed out, they weren't property owners. So they were second-class citizens. You know what percentage of the adult human beings living in the newly created United States in 1789? You know how many of the actual human beings living here would have been considered legal persons?
1%.
1%. It's good. That 1%, 99% meme, that really works. That's a good one. But come on, don't be so cynical. It's not 1%, it's 5%. Let that sink in for a moment. 95% of the adult human beings living in the United States were not considered legal persons. It took social movements to change that. Not just good ideas, but people willing to put their shoulder to the wheel, to work and struggle and sweat, and in some cases give up blood, right? Social movements are the things that change things, not our elected representatives. We have to, like, with all due respect, an elected representative or a politician is like one of those people who are staying back comfortably until they see a parade, and then, after we've organized a parade, they hustle up to get in front of it. We got to build a parade. We got to build a movement that's so large and so powerful that it changes that. And now that I've laid this all out, we might ask, well, where should a corporation go? Well, here's a question. What does it take to form a corporation in Minnesota today?
Charter.
A charter. And it's actually easy to get. You fill out a piece of paper, pay $75, and you will get a charter from a clerk will rubber stamp it and send it to you. You know how long your charter can last in Minnesota?
Forever.
Forever, Will. Do you know what you can do with the corporate charter according to the Minnesota Corporation Code today? Answer, anything legally permissible. That's what your corporate corporation code in Minnesota says today. Now I'm going to take you back to 1789 and tell you what it once took to form a corporation in every one of the 13 states. This was true for the next 100 years, by the way. First, your application didn't go to a trivial clerk. Your application went directly to the State House of Representatives, where they discussed it, debated it, and voted on it, and you had to get a majority vote. But after a majority vote of the House, that's not enough, because now it goes to the State Senate, where they discuss it, debate it, and vote on it, and you got to get another majority vote. But that's still not enough, because after a majority vote in the House and a majority vote in the State Senate, it goes to the governor, who has to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything like creating a corporate charter today?
Sounds like a law.
Thank you, Will. It's a law. The founders' original intent of the corporation was the political equivalent of a state law, because they realized that limited liability was a privilege, not a right. I'm going to say that again. Having a limited liability is a privilege, not a right. And they said, we're going to allow them to exist, but only if they are properly politically controlled. Because remember, and especially amongst conservatives, this is limiting their liability or responsibility. How many times have you heard principled conservatives say, we have to make people responsible? Well, I agree with that. So did the founders. Limited liability, it should only be tightly politically controlled. Oh, and by the way, in the founders' era, once you got a corporate charter, you know how long it lasted? 5, no more than 10 years. Every corporate charter was limited in time. And at the end of that time period, at the end of it, the corporate charter evaporated under law. And if you wanted to go back and continue to operate with limited liability, you had to reapply all over again. Oh, and get this. Even if you got limited liability corporation, even in that narrow time period, if you ever did any other type of business other than the specific one you had applied for, guess what happened to your corporate charter? Scratched, revoked. It's called corporate charter revocation. A corporate charter was routinely revoked for merely doing what it was not specifically allowed to do. Oh, and I'm not through. Even if you were operating in your narrow time period, even if you were doing the specific thing that you had been granted to do, if anything that your corporation did violated the public trust, guess what happened to your corporation? Revoked! Corporate charters were once routinely revoked for merely acting outside the public interest, which brings us to this pop quiz question. Somebody name a single one of the Fortune 500 corporations that could even operate with the political restrictions that our founders once put on them. I'll wait. None! Again, I'm not saying that Move to Amend is against corporations. I'm merely pointing, and by the way, there are hundreds of thousands of corporations that are operating today in good faith. They're producing goods and services. They're making profits for shareholders. This is not the issue. The issue is today these huge corporations have become governing institutions outside of the control of we the people. And so, now that we know it takes an action of state government to even create that corporate charter, we understand that the corporate charter can be used to hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We understand that the corporate charter describes the duties of what a corporation can or cannot do. We understand that a corporation should only be allowed to exist if it serves the public interest. Isn't it obvious that a corporation should be here as our founders envisioned? And now, my friends, I thank you for your patience, because here comes the punchline. When the U.S. Supreme Court comes waltzing in and says, notwithstanding logic and law and precedent and U.S. history, 5 of us are going to tell 300 million of you, from now on, you have to treat this artificial entity created by the state, you have to treat it as if it's a person with rights. It perverts the whole thing. See, corporate personhood is just a shorthand for the illegitimate, totally court-created idea that we have to treat a corporation as if it's a person with rights. And friends, if that is true, it means we have lost control of our own democratic republic, because corporate lawyers are allowed to go into court and overturn any law you can imagine. Yes, campaign finance laws get overturned, but you know what else? Environmental protection laws, worker safety laws, public health laws. There's not a single law that has not been narrowed in such a way that we cannot control ourselves. This is the point that I'm making, friends, that Move to Amend is part of a movement that is simply saying, ya basta. Enough already. This is crazy. We need to build a movement the same way the abolitionists did, the women's suffrage movement did, the trade union movement, the civil rights movement. We need to start in our communities, in our churches and synagogues and mosques. We need to go to our trade union halls and our community centers. We need to go everywhere where people are and start having an honest conversation. And here's the thing. Remember at the very beginning I said, I want to challenge you to challenge me. Is this story, and this story is coming to an end. Just under an hour, right? 50 minutes, told the story. And now my question. Is this a story that only liberals and progressives can hear and appreciate?
No.
No. And I'll tell you something truthfully. I have given this story in Occupy encampments and Unitarian churches and labor halls, and I get applause. But you know what? I've also given this story at Tea Party groups. And guess what? I got applause there too. Now, the applause came at totally different places. But it still comes, which is to say this. There is a way to tell this story that actually unites all of us. Almost everybody believes in this country in the idea of a democratic republican form of rule. That we the people are sovereign, we're supposed to rule ourselves, but the one thing the majority is not supposed to be able to do is to violate the inherent inalienable constitutional rights of ordinary people. Move to Amend is leading a movement on the simple proposition that we must correct the court from their erroneous, illegitimate creation of both corporate constitutional rights and money as speech. Two legal doctrines, not just one court decision, not just one law, but doctrines, right, that taken together have stolen our sacred right to self-government. And as a lawyer, what just chaps my hide, what makes me righteously angry is that they're using our legal system to legitimize the theft. And they're telling us we have to accept it. Well, friends, we don't have to accept it. Any more than the abolitionists had to accept slavery that was codified by the Constitution and the courts upheld. Any more than the women had to accept laws that said that they were second-class citizens. The reality is we have it in our power, but not alone. I can't do it. Me and Paul can't do it. Me, Paul, Nancy, Jenny, and Amanda?
Yeah.
Deb, we can't do it. But hundreds of thousands of us, millions of us together, we can. And I'm going to conclude with this before I open it up for discussion and questions. Move to Amend began in a living room in 2010. There were 12 people. Today, as I stand before you, 363,000 people and growing. We have helped 600 communities pass resolutions of support. We have helped 16 states pass resolutions. And we've got about 100 local affiliates. And welcome Rochester, one of the local affiliates. Let's give a round of applause. Locals. And get this. We put our language on the ballot 200 times. In other words, not just resolutions where the city council members vote on it, but 200 times we put it on the ballot where ordinary people get to vote on whether they support the idea that a corporation should be a person with constitutional rights. Been on the ballot 200 times. Guess how many times we've won?
Every single one. 200!
Well, we haven't lost once. And yes, that includes Madison and Boston and San Francisco, the liberal bastions. You know what else it includes? Salt Lake City, Utah. It includes Waukesha, Wisconsin, home of Republican Tea Party Governor Scott Walker. We were on the ballot in the last spring election. We won there. We won in the state of Montana. Statewide, state initiative. The Move to Amend language. Anybody going to argue that Montana is overrun by hippies and liberals? Those cowboys voted for us. We haven't lost yet. So here's the thing. Move to Amend has figured out a way to tell a story that can unite liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats, Greens, Libertarians, Independents alike. And now I'm going to ask my colleagues in the back to give you an opportunity to join this movement. We're going to pass a petition around. If you I know Paul Carlson already is on there. So what we're asking, we'll start one in the back and one in the front. Y'all make sure everybody gets a chance, right? So we'll start one on one side, one on the other. And let's just give everybody a chance. If you're not involved yet, we're asking you to get involved. I want to be honest, friends. This is not something that we're just going to submit on bended knee to everybody. If you sign up, and I hope you will, this is an organizing petition. We're going to be in touch with you because we don't know if this is an organizing meeting yet. You know why? Because I'm going to be gone tomorrow, and you will still be here. And guess who else will be here? The Rochester Move to Men. And guess what else happens? They're going to continue to be here because the Rochester Move to Men meets on the fourth Monday of every month at 7 p.m. at the People's Food Co-op, which means very specifically their next meeting is August 25th, and they need you there. So we're going to be in touch with you to get you plugged in, to give you, because there is so much to do, and we're not saying you have to do everything, we're saying you have to do what you need to do. And only you know the answer to that. So we're going to pass that around, and all I'm going to ask is this. If you're going to sign up, and I hope you will, print legibly. Paul, is there anything more frustrating to have a whole big old stack of petitions and you can't read the information? It's maddening. So look, if like me you've got bad handwriting, slow down. Take your time, right? We've got plenty of time. We'll get it to you. But we need you to get involved. So now, at the end, it's been 55 minutes. I'm going to ask comments and questions. If anybody has a question about what I've asked or a comment to make, so sir, you'll be number 1. Let's just do a quick stack. This gentleman is number 1. Will, you'll be number, remember your number. Will be 2. Sir, you'll be number 3. Annette will be 4. Number 5. This gentleman will be number 6. Number 7, our media guy, number 7. And now, before we get into that, I got to ask, hey, Jenny, what did I charge you to come here today?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nancy, what did I charge you? Paul, you've been with me a number of different times. What's my standard fee?
Whatever it is, it's a good deal.
The answer is 0. Because here's the thing, friends. Although, consider this a free will gift, right? I travel the country, I just do this. But here's the thing. I still like to eat. And so what I am going to do, you know what, if this were Texas, there wouldn't be a man without a hat on his head. Oh, can I get that little plastic bucket? Can we get that plastic bucket? Because what I'm going to do, I'm literally going to pass this around. And if you're capable of or willing to make a donation, please do. Now, here's the thing, y'all. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you're willing to, make a donation. And here's the thing. If you don't have it with you, but you want to take one of these, it's already addressed. All the information is there. Y'all been to church, right? This should not be like that unusual. Take one of these with you and mail it in. And if you don't want to put any money on here, that's totally fine too. Don't leave just because we're passing around a little bucket. The last thing is this. Is there anybody in this crowd who would like to be able to make a credit card donation? Because we actually have the technology to do that. Is there anybody, and we'll get Deb to help out. Does anybody want to make a credit card donation? Because if you do, I just want to make sure we've got you. All good. So thank you for the offer, Deb, but we're good. So, as those are going around, the petitions and the donation jar, we'll come to this gentleman with question number 1, or comment number 1.
What was your reaction? Did you give this talk to Chamber of Commerce?
I have.
What was their reaction?
Here's the interesting thing. I got to be clear. I've given this presentation to local chambers of commerce. Local chambers of commerce, ordinary merchants. Once I explain, we're not against limited liability. We're only against the idea of corporations having constitutional rights and how that actually will help them as local merchants. They sign on. We've got literally hundreds, if not thousands, of local business owners who are actually supporting Move to Men. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a completely different story. We should make a distinction between the local chambers of commerce and merchants who are the backbone of this economy. By the way, do you know that the Fortune 500 corporations are actually a net loser of jobs over the last 2 decades, and not losing jobs like, oops, where'd they go? But lost jobs as in intentional corporate decisions to ship jobs overseas. The only reason this economy is afloat today is because local merchants who feel patriotic to this country and to their local communities, and even though they're not mega wealthy, you know what those local merchants do? They also support the Little League, and they support the girls and boys clubs, and they're the backbone of real charitable giving in this country, and these big, huge corporations give 0.001%, and we're supposed to be grateful for it. So that's what I'm going to say, is make a distinction between local merchants, locally owned and independently operated, versus these big, huge transnational corporations. Who's number 2? Will.
I just want to say thank you so much for what you do. You are a true inspiration, and I couldn't thank you enough for coming to Rochester and supporting our community. And I think what you said and how you articulated was just flawless. It was just perfect. And I just want to say thank you again for everything you do on behalf of Move to Amend. And so my question is, how long do you think this will take? Do you think this will take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Because I know that to take a constitutional amendment takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of preparation, and it takes a lot of time. So time-wise, how long do you think it will take?
It's a fair question. I'm going to be very candid, because like when you ask me a question, you'll get an honest answer. My honest answer is, first of all, I want to be clear. We are going to amend the Constitution. I do believe that with every fiber in my being. I wouldn't do this if I didn't think that we could win. And the constitutional amendment is a 15 to 20 year, like that's the arc to amending the Constitution. But I want to be clear. There are going to be a lot of victories along the way as the movement rises. You're going to see a lot of things begin to shift. They're already starting to shift, right? The political discourse is shifting now. And again, let's give a round of applause to the Occupy movement, right? The Occupy movement that started with just ordinary people shifted and began a conversation about income inequality that had not been taking place for 40 years, right, in this country. I mean, like, so something is happening, and I think look, Move to Amend would never dare to speak for the Occupy movement, but we happily collaborate with the Occupy movement. And I don't know exactly, let me tell you something, Occupy is not dead. Occupy 2.0 is gestating as we speak. I don't know what Occupy 2.0 is actually going to look like. I doubt it will be encampments, but something will emerge out of it. And Move to Amend stands ready to collaborate with Occupy 2.0 regardless of what it looks like. Right? There are still occupiers out there. How many people here today, right now, would say, well, you know what, I'm an occupier. Let's get a round of applause for the hands that just went up. These are the people who prepared the way for what's going on. And I say all this, Will, to say 20 years, 15 to 20 years to amend the Constitution, but we shift the culture as we go. And every fight that we make, we open up the opportunity for more victories to be had. And remember this. Move to Amend, when I talk about us like abolitionists, I mean that sincerely. But abolitionists of the 1840s, when people were meeting in small churches and barns, oftentimes in secret, right? To have clandestine meetings. And then, with all that work and the creation of the Underground Railroad and people willing to sweat and bleed and die for the idea, not to say on a legal principle, but to say as a matter of moral, ethic, responsibility, this whole institution is profoundly wrong. Well, I'm here to tell you, as a matter of ethics and morals, corporations having constitutional rights is profoundly wrong. And we have to be just that serious.
Well, the Move to Amend, we've talked about this at our meetings here in Rochester, that Move to Amend is saying that they want a constitutional amendment, otherwise they want to convene a convention.
Mm-hmm.
Is that always going to be something that people run up against and go, whoa, because they're threatened that there will be a blank slate. That means that you can re-amend everything. But now the Senate Judiciary Committee, people how are we all gonna work in little bits together with the big bits?
Well, and then I would say it this way. Let's remember that Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution provides how to amend it. And there are two ways to amend the Constitution, according to Article 5. One is if 2/3 of Congress make a proposal, agree to a certain language, and make a proposal, then it goes to the states, and the states one by one vote on it, and if 3/4 of the states say yes, the Constitution is amended. That's happened 27 times already, right? So amendments happen. By the way, hold on, let me finish. So that's one way to amend the Constitution. It's happened 27 times. The other way to amend the Constitution is also described, and that is if 2/3 of the states call for a constitutional convention. Then anything that is proposed out of that convention still goes to the states for ratification. It still takes 3/4 of the states to ratify. That's sometimes called the Constitutional Convention or an Amendments Convention. But you have to remember, it's not a blank slate. The proposals still have to go to 3/4 of the states to pass it. So it is a huge political lift either way. You have to completely shift the culture of society in order to win. Now, move to amend is very clear. Whether it's 2/3 of Congress or 2/3 of the states calling a convention, we don't care. We will support either way to amend the Constitution. But I want to be clear. You know, Yogi Berra said it well. When you come to a fork in the road, what did he say?
Take it.
Take it. Right? So, but here's the thing, friends. Before we come to that fork in the road of 2/3 of Congress or 2/3 of the state calling for an amendments convention, there's a lot of political road that needs to be traveled. We're so early on this. So move to amend declines to take the position that some groups are saying, it must be done through Congress. Other people are saying, it must be done through an amendments convention. We say, you're nuts to be arguing with each other about that. The thing is, I'm proud that there are 363,000 people. We need 500,000 people. We need 1 million people. We need 3 million. We need 5 million. We need to make this a political demand in the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Independence Party in this state. We need the Pink and Polka Dot Party. We got to make it clear, and here's the thing. Move to Amend is rolling out Pledge to Amend, a campaign where we go to candidates for office, whether they're an incumbent or a challenger, no matter what political party they're in, and we simply ask, will you support the Move to Amend's position to abolish corporate constitutional rights and money of speech? And we don't care what party you're in. We are not a front group for the Democratic Party or the Green Party or the Republican Party or the Libertarian Party. We are a people's movement making a demand. And here's the thing in that. That approach is actually what abolished slavery. What abolished the concept of the legal principle that said organizing trade unions is a federal criminal conspiracy. Do you know that that's actually what the courts once said? And both parties agreed? All I'm getting at is, when you say, how do we do the big and the little? By being principled. By saying, we are not partisan. We are about principle. And we're going to maintain our principle and work with anybody who will work with us. Number 5. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that shareholders and stockholders, that's all okay and stuff, but what do you think the root of that shareholder and stockholder position within a corporation which is made up of people? How does that truly affect the foundation of the corporate rule in this country?
Well, what I would say is this, that individuals who are either shareholders or workers or whatever are operating in what they perceive to be their self-interest. So, if the legal system allows and in fact encourages them to ship jobs overseas, that's what they'll do. It doesn't make them bad people. I mean, so this is the point. A legal system that says that a corporation has constitutional rights, which means that corporate lawyers can argue to overturn laws, they're good human beings, but they're just advocating for their clients. Again, I'm not going to turn this into some people are good or some people are bad. I'm saying structures and systems are in place that have encouraged and facilitated bad public policy. And the idea that a corporation is a person with constitutional right is bad public policy. That is not just a bad idea, it's preventing us from solving anything. Does that make sense? Good. Who's number 6? Yes, sir.
I really like Move to Amend. great. I do think some more can be done along the same lines, I guess, as far as gaining control of our country and the problem with the big corporations is where I see this. At one time, the corporations served the communities within which they operate.
Absolutely.
But now with globalism, this is all.
It's virtually impossible.
Yeah. So getting that back, I don't know really where that happens, but a couple of things that government has duties to the people. The non-profits have duties to the people. But it seems like the for-profits only have duties to shareholders.
Yep.
And maximizing profits and shareholder value.
So here's the thing, let me just cut to the chase here. Maximizing shareholder value, that's actually a concept created by the courts too. It's called shareholder primacy. It was created in a case called Dodge versus Ford Motor Company. The Dodge brothers, who were shareholders of the Ford Motor Company, sued Henry Ford. Why? Because Henry Ford was paying enough money for his workers to be able to buy the cars he was producing. And Henry Ford said, I think that's just good business and it keeps people happy. He wasn't like some kind of radical communist. But here's the thing, the Dodge Motor Company said, but you're paying them too much. We can get people to work for even less. And as shareholders, you're violating our shareholder rights. The court could have easily said no. That's a decision that the corporate board can make. They agreed with the Dodge brothers. All I'm getting at, sir, is to remember that in court decisions, it's always one party versus another, right? This idea of corporate shareholder primacy was created. This idea that corporations have constitutional rights was created. We can create a different way to do economics and to do politics and to create our social institutions. I'll put you on the end of the stack.
I just like to layer something right on what.
Well, be very brief because we have a stack, so go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking of Margaret Kelly's books and minority capital, where she's talking about that our corporations are structured like aristocracy, where it's the stockholders move the top down, and instead, what she's saying is we need to flip it, where the employees, they will for the public good, they're structured for the public good, and the employees will, as far as wages and all those decisions, rather than it all being up here. And it's very interesting where she's in Minnesota, actually.
So here's the thing. David's on the stack. I'm going to do one more round. Are there any other comments or questions? I'm happy to do it. So let's do this.